Good day and welcome to the October Lunch and Learn with the LINK. Today's conference is being recorded. At this time, I would now like to turn the conference over to Jennifer Gillette. Ma'am, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Yes, my name is Jennifer Gillette, and I'm the staff social worker at the National Bone Marrow Transplant Link, and I'd like to welcome everyone today. Just so you know, today's presentation will be on navigating and advocating during a bone marrow transplant. It's our goal that today's program will inspire you and equip you with a new skill or idea as you learn how to go through this journey. A special thank you to Pharmacyclics, Genentech, and Leukemia and Lymphoma Society for making this program possible today. And we also thank our LINK partners for keeping all support available to those who need it most. Just so everyone's aware how today's program will go, we'll start with a couple basic introductions about the LINK, just in case there's anyone joining us today that has not heard of nbmtLINK. And then I will present for about 10 minutes from a social work perspective, some ways to navigate and advocate for yourself. And then we will have our caregiving survivor, Sharon Minton, who will also speak for about the same amount of time. And then when she's done, we will open up the floor to questions and then wrap up with thank yous and a couple of resources. So for those who might not be familiar with the LINK, our mission is dedicated to helping individuals and their families from diagnosis through survivorship. We work with hospitals, cancer centers, and other organizations to reinforce and complement medical care by providing resources, support, and education. Some of the resources we provide to help families navigate the transplant journey are our chronic graft versus host telephone series and webinar support. We have a caregiver webinar series and a peer support mentor program for patients, which is both for caregivers and donors. And just so you know, our speaker, Sharon, is from this today, and her husband is also one of our mentors. We have our second birthdays recognition program, and we have multiple books that answer a lot of questions about the transplant journey and dealing with the emotional aspects. We provide a variety of opportunities for you to get more information, and we encourage you to reach out to us if you would like more. Before we begin today's program, I'd just like to remind you of a few etiquette items to maximize the experience for everyone on the call today. First of all, we strive to create an atmosphere that allows for all to participate. Due to the limited amount of time and with a desire for everyone to have the opportunity to participate, I may need to cut some questions or comments short just so that we get as many of the questions in today. Please also refrain from any judgmental statements towards fellow participants and respecting that everyone handles this experience in their own unique way. And please know that the information provided in this program is meant to stimulate conversation with your healthcare team and is not meant to replace any individualized medical plan. So now on to the educational part of our program, navigating and advocating through the transplant journey. For those of you who are able to print your slides, I'm going to be pretty much going in order, and I'm starting with the slide with the picture of the healthcare team and the superhero in the middle. As you walk through the transplant or any other health issue, it's important for you to remember that you are the captain of the healthcare team. The more passive you are with your care, the easier it is to feel out of control. Studies actually tell us that patients and loved ones of cancer patients who learn about the disease and are actively involved in their medical care tend to have a better quality of life. Some studies even suggest that they might even have better outcomes because if you're communicating effectively, that only helps the team. So learning how to communicate what needs you have and helping the team to understand your wishes or concerns will only help them understand how to best work with you. Some things are not in your control. However, the quality of your life improves when you have a voice in the things that are. Sometimes we need to be that squeaky wheel and be creative in making things better. For example, even though I know Sharon's going to be getting more into this today, but I remember one of our patient speakers had talked about how he modified the room after his transplant to make it more homey because it was really hard on him not being at home. His wife even kept them on Skype at night so that if either of them woke, that they could communicate with each other. So if something like that, I just encourage you to think outside the box on what your needs are. And if there's a physical symptom, be really open with your health care team as well. Sometimes I think people get in their mind that they just need to tough it out. But if your health care team doesn't know what's going on, it's hard for them to know how to best care for you. Now, for example, what are some of the things that you might want to talk about? There is a slide here that has a few questions. I won't go through all of them, but first of all, you decide how aggressive and what risks you're willing to take for your treatment. You decide where you want to be treated. Even though insurance can certainly affect that decision, if you have a preference or if you feel someone has an expertise in a certain area, I would encourage you to go for that. You also get to choose who you share information with. If you're a private person, not everybody needs to know your story or your situation. You can frame it how you want. And who is able to make decisions for you when there's an emergency? You don't just have to put the typical person down either, like maybe a spouse. Maybe there's a child that you know that you're on the same page one of your adult children is on, and you want them to be the representative, or you feel that there's someone that can do that best. That is your choice. So these are just some of the decisions that you can make. There's plenty of more that could be had. But I'm also giving you a web resource here on canceradvocacy.org, and just coming down with ways to know yourself and what's important to you. I would encourage you to have those thoughts, because really whatever you can do to customize this to your needs is just going to help. Now, as far as navigating and advocating, I'd like to look at the team that you have in front of you. And it's really important that you utilize your team and know what to expect from each person on the team. On that list, you're going to see caregivers, spouse, family, and sometimes even a great support network outside of that. The more people that can work together for you, I know a lot of patients have told us about like websites where care is coordinated, where maybe meals are made for a family or other things that are needed. And the more people you have helping, that will help. Of course, your doctor is a main player on this team as well. A nurse, oncology social workers, financial counselors, they are great for helping you find assistance programs, grants, knowing whether or not to apply for certain programs for aid on the state or the federal level. The nutritionists also are very important. How do you expedite healing? It's important to remember that food is medicine. And if they do not refer a nutritionist to you, ask if there's a nutritionist available. Typically, on a cancer care team, that's part of them meeting their certification as having a nutritionist. So if you're not seeing someone like this at your center, feel free to ask. There's also usually clergy available, and there's community resources, national organizations, peer mentors like we have here at the LINK, and talking to fellow transplant survivors can really make a big difference. So who has your back? Your caregiver and your support team are just vital. If there's more than one person, communication and organization is critical. Everyone's got to be on the same page and have the same goal. An active caregiver makes all the difference in the world. Your caregiver has to be able to be tapped when you reach your limit. There are a second set of ears at appointments. They can be a secretary, help you be organized, an amateur health aide, someone that's willing to learn certain things to help care for you, and make sure that your caregiver knows that it's important that they have caregivers for themselves, people that are looking out for them. So what are ways to advocate for yourself with your doctor? Again, I printed off some things from the NCCS here on your slides that you can review, but I'll address a couple of them. So what are realistic goals for your treatment? Never be shy about asking those kinds of questions to your doctor. Your doctor has a lot of great experience. They know research and they know standards of care, and although they can't tell the future, they can give you some realistic goals on what they're expecting. Other questions, such as what are my chances of a long-term response with a good quality of life? Those, of course, are things that you want to consider. Or clinical trials. If ever you're interested in clinical trials, I know Be the Match has an amazing program. We've actually had the person leading that speak for us, and they have a really great way of being able to break down the studies into something that they can relay easily. And then, are there different approaches to treating my kind of cancer? Certainly a transplant is a big decision to make, and knowing what the research says, all of this is very important to discuss with your doctor. But again, doctors give their best. They give you their medical expertise, research, and years of experience, but they cannot predict the future or how your journey will unfold. You ultimately choose how you want to proceed based on the advice they give. And you also can stop treatment, change your mind, or seek other opinions. Sometimes people get in their head when they're dealing with their doctors, it's kind of based on how we deal with authority. A lot of times people treat doctors how they would treat a parent. And, as we get older, it's always wonderful to respect what they bring to the table, but you are an equal with them, and a conversation needs to be had. Now, on to nurses. What do the nurses play on the team? First of all, nurses are amazing educators. They are knowledgeable regarding tips for symptom management. When I used to have questions when patients would call me at the hospital and say, I'm dealing with this symptom or that symptom, if I had time to grab the doctor between them running in from one room to the next, I would certainly do that. But a lot of times the nurses that had worked there for years just had tips that you wouldn't even imagine. A lot of them had teas for patients that were having a hard time with constipation, or knowledge of medical or medicine combinations that may help with certain symptoms like nausea and things like that. So nurses are just amazing at symptom management. They're often experts at making complicated medical discussions more understandable, too. And they're usually more accessible. Now, for the other people on your team, oncology social workers, they're to provide individual and family counseling, offer support groups. They're advocates when you feel your voice is not being heard. So if there's times when you're going through something in healthcare, the social worker on your team should be able to step up, maybe set up family meeting, or even consult with the doctor if you're having a hard time. They also connect you with resources within your community and nationally that can help you meet your needs for financial concerns, transport, medication assistance, co-pays, help in the home, etc. They also can be great educators, and they assist patients with applying for disability and assistance programs. So on the next slide, I'm starting here with some of the resources that I think are really good out there. The first one you're going to see is the Cancer Care Helping Hand slide. If you're needing resources, and if you can read it, it's got things from co-pays, dental, financial assistance, fertility. It's got transplant information, medications. It's got a whole list of things that you can tap into, and it should bring you to an organization that helps. Now, these kinds of things, if you as the person going through it does not have the energy, these are things, too, that you can ask people that want to be a support to help you with, too. Because sometimes people get lost in this loop where they try one organization who refers them to another, and then that person refers them to another, and it can be exhausting at times. So one thing I think anyone that's going through a health journey needs to learn is how to ask for help, and that it can be so hard, but I think that's a really important skill. But these resources on cancer care are excellent, and I would highly recommend them. On the next slide, you'll see I also put a connection for the Cancer Financial Assistance Coalition. has a very similar setup to cancer care. This was brought together by several key organizations like the American Cancer Society. And again, it's a way you can tap in and say, okay, what kind of needs do I need help with? One thing I'd like to point out as we're looking at these two particular sites is also keep in mind when it comes to getting financial resources, which one is the easiest to get? You know, some people will tell me, well, I need help with transportation, but I don't need help with food. Food is usually an easy one to get. And so if you can get help with food, then you can use the money that you have for your food towards your transportation. And so it's really important to think outside the box and look at your finances as something that can shift and flex based on what supports you can get. I also encourage you to be aware of the local resources. Again, a social worker at your organization should be able to tell you which ones work the best. I know when I was in the hospital, I knew there were some organizations that maybe had long waiting lists on a regular basis, but then there was others that pretty much every time I applied a patient to, we got support for them. And so your local social worker should know that kind of information, but there's also ones that you can even try on your own, like Catholic Charities or Jewish Social Services, Salvation Army. Many of these organizations might be able to give grants to help cover the cost of some expenses. And again, keep in mind that shift mentality where you can get help, then use those funds for something else. The American Cancer Society, United Way, I also in our community, the Area Agency on Aging is one that I turn to a lot. A lot of times you can get lists from them on reduced cost services. So let's say you're needing help in the home. You have your caregiver, but your caregiver needs a break to get things done sometimes. A lot of times they would come up with reduced cost services. And so I turn to the Area Agency on Aging quite a bit. There's also the social services. It's the Department of Social Services, which you can apply for at a city or county level. And there's community-based groups such as local churches, synagogues, mosques, and lodges that can also help sometimes, as well as different fundraising. There's different organizations online that you can reach out to that will even help you organize your fundraiser. And I know sometimes people will say, well, I don't go to a church or I don't go to a temple. How do I get help? But there's still many, excuse me, there's still many that have outreach programs that are not based whether you're a member or not. I know, like my church has a program called Love My City that if someone applies for it, as long as they have a need that's reasonable that could be met by the church, they meet it regardless of what someone's religious thoughts are or affiliation. Now, another important resource I wanted to point out to you today was a great one for financial, legal, and insurance questions. Triage Cancer just spoke for us about a week ago, and this organization was founded by two lawyers who really just wanted to help the cancer community and really understand some of the legalities and financial toxicity that can happen as a result of your diagnosis. Anytime someone calls me with insurance or legal questions, I always refer them to them. They show you how to do the math even on which plans are best for you, and they're familiar with the laws, and also how to refer you to maybe some of the local laws that would affect you as well. The next slide is when you need prescription help. There's a great website called needymeds.org, and it has all kinds of prescription assistance programs and applications online. You can often get help if you are the typical middle-class American. Some people think that assistance is only for people that are at the federal poverty level. But a lot of these pharmaceutical companies do have assistance for the average middle-class American. So I would encourage you to at least try to look into it if that is an issue for you. You can go online and they even have, you can punch in the name of the drug, and then they will tell you what the criteria is for that assistance program. I also highly recommend peer support. I know there's many organizations out there that offer it, but of course, National Bone Marrow Transplant Link, that's one of the things we pride ourselves on. We have many great volunteers, and you can talk to someone who's been through a transplant or has been a caregiver and is able to lend an ear, answer questions, and help you feed hope to you that is needed as you go through this process. As far as support groups go, it's really important that you get the emotional support you need because going through a transplant affects the mind, body, and spirit. Your hospitals should have some recommendations, or there's the wellness community. Some people might know it as Gilda's Club that has locations throughout the country, as well as there are many online groups that can be cancer-specific. But there's two organizations I list there that have a great deal of support programs, both at Cancer Care and the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. Now, if you decide that you need some individual counseling, which many people have decided to go this route, I've also put a site here for Psychology Today. If you're interested in a counselor, you can always ask people in the community, in the transplant community or the social worker if they have recommendations. But if not, you can interview them. On this Psychology Today, they write a blog on where they feel their strengths and their skills are at, and you easily can call and interview and make sure it's the right fit for you. Because if someone hasn't had a lot of experience in oncology, they just might not understand some of the things that you're dealing with. And so my main point with all these resources is, one, I hope there's one that maybe is helpful with the needs you have today, but I encourage you to think outside the box. For example, if you need help in the home, you can ask the social worker or nurses or any aides at the hospital that maybe are contingent, that maybe could use a little extra money on this side. That's another way that you could save money, because a lot of times if you use one of the agencies for help in the home, it's almost double what you would pay someone on the side. And then where is help available, and thus where can I shift funds, again, is another important concept. And look at any unique scenarios you have to consider. For example, I had a patient I was trying to help with some transport, and we discovered they were in a territory for the hurricane relief, and there were special grants just for that. So if you think about, is there anything that you maybe could tap into that might increase the chances of you getting that support? So those are just some of my ideas as a social worker on ways to get your needs met and to make sure you are aware of who's on your team and how to advocate for yourself. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Sharon, Sharon was a caregiver for her husband, Rob. And when he went through a transplant in October of 2014, she helped him in his fight against T-cell lymphoma. She became a master navigator and is here to help you learn from her experiences and to offer you some hope. Thanks so much for joining us, Sharon.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everybody. As Jennifer said, my husband had his transplant on October 7th, 2014, so he just celebrated his 4th rebirthday, and he's doing really well today. We've just been so blessed. He had a cutaneous T-cell lymphoma, a really rare type of lymphoma, and he had an unrelated donor, so he was a matched unrelated donor, and we know that donor today, so that's wonderful. He has become like part of our family, he and his family. So anyway, in the very beginning, the pre-transplant time, there's a lot of preparation to do before you get to the transplant. My husband had his transplant at Shands Cancer Hospital in Gainesville, and I know each transplant center has a little bit of a different protocol. So he had a 2-week prep session beforehand, and what you need to do as a caregiver is prepare your support system at home. If you're going to be away from home like I was with my husband, You need to have your children taken care of if you have children, and you need to prepare to have your pets taken care of while you're gone, and have your mail forwarded, and also arrange to have an alternative caregiver to relieve you at some point, because you're probably going to need that. It's as intense as it is for the patient to be going through, it's just as intense for you. Prepare for what you'll want to bring with you to the hospital. I liked bringing pillows and blankets, a familiar quilt or comforter from home, because you really want to make that hospital room as homey as possible, like Jennifer had said earlier. It's so important to not feel so isolated in that hospital room. Bring some family photos, some photos of your pets, your children, your friends. Bring puzzles and movies and magazines, books to read, journals to keep. Journaling was a really important thing for me to do while I was there. It helped me keep my thoughts in order every day, because the days just kind of tend to meld together as you're going through them, and you forget one day to the next if you don't write it down what's been going on. So snacks are also a great thing to have with you in the room. So make it almost like a little apartment for yourself and your patient. I brought battery-operated candles that were operated with a remote control. I bought those at Costco, and I put those all around the room. And when the nurses came in the evening, they'd always say, "Oh, it just feels like a little apartment in here. It's just so nice." So I did that to make it as homey as possible. You know, we'd turn the lights way down and just turn the candles on, and it made it so much more cozy in the room. And make sure you have some good soft music to listen to make it a little more relaxing. Also, bring maybe a mask. If you're going to stay in the room like I did with my husband, you're going to be interrupted 24/7. So an eye mask and maybe earplugs to help you sleep a little bit better at night might be a good idea as well. Also, put a communication network in place to keep your family and friends updated while you're in the hospital with your spouse or your patient, like a Caring Bridge account. Or what I did is I created a private Facebook page for my husband that I could add the friends and family to, and I documented everything with videos and photos every day. So, and other people could also put videos and photos on for my husband, and it made him feel more like he was connected to everybody else. Now, during the hospital stay, you're going to need to get out and get exercise when you can, instead of just staying in the room constantly. Go out for a walk or a run, and it'll just help you clear your mind. And then also encourage your patient to exercise as often as he or she can, because it's all a part of their recovery process. Instead of just laying in bed, they need to get up and walk to help them recover. Our unit had an exercise bike on it, so my husband could use that every once in a while. Keeping their strength up is so important. Get rest and naps as you can, just as your patient does. If you're staying in the patient's room like I did, you're going to constantly have that interrupted sleep. So catch some naps during the day while you can as well. And again, journal every day. That helps you keep a record of what's going on with your patient. And it also helps in your communication network. You can keep that updated every day by posting your journal or aspects of your journal on that every day. When my husband felt better, I had him update the Facebook page, which really, really helped him feel like he was communicating with everybody instead of feeling so isolated in the hospital. It's hard to talk on the phone much because it's just hard to connect with everybody on the phone while you're in the hospital. There's times that the patient feels so awful and nobody really wants to call because they don't want to catch you at a bad time. So the best way to do it was for him to create his own Facebook posting. Encourage your patient to keep their days as normal as possible. They should get up and shower every day and get fully dressed instead of just lying in bed. It really helps them emotionally to get through and feel more like a normal day. There's going to be days that that's not going to be possible. Every day isn't going to be a great day, but even if they can, any day, they should get up and get dressed. Now, if you were able to arrange for an alternate caregiver to relieve you, that's great. So you need to take advantage of that at some point and get away for a couple of days. Get out and go get your hair done or your nails done, just something just to change the atmosphere and relieve your mind for a little bit. Your patient is going to have nurses and doctors and caregivers watching them 24/7. You're going to be hyper-focused on your patient, so you need to have a little bit of a break just for yourself so you can be better for you and especially better for your patient. Now, when your patient is released from the hospital, make sure that they come to an environment that's really super clean. That's so, so important. I put in new filters in the air conditioning or the furnace system, and I disinfected everything that I could, doorknobs, faucets, countertops, sinks, bathrooms completely, and vacuumed everything thoroughly, and only vacuum when the patient isn't present. To make sure that there's no mold in the environment. That was really important. We had rented an apartment across the street from the hotel, and we had to prearrange that before transplant where we were going to be renting, and we looked at quite a few places. And since we're down here in Florida where mold is prevalent, there were a couple of places that were recommended by the hospital even that we went to look at, and when we went in them, you could smell mildew, and that's so important that the patient is not in an environment where mold would be present. Make sure that there are no trip hazards for them because falling is still a risk for your patients, so help them avoid stairs if possible. You're still going to need a support system when you get out of the hospital, your patient gets out of the hospital, because your patient will still be going back for treatments at first every day, and then it kind of dwindles down. So you're still going to need somebody to take your children to and from school or stay with them at home if, they're young children. You're still going to need somebody to take care of your pets for you. That's really important. I went to my husband's outpatient clinic with him every single day because they're still not thinking very clearly. They're going to need another set of ears. So it was really important that I was there with him to find out, what his counts were all of the time, things to watch for. So I still spent a lot of time with him after transplant, after he was released. I was also responsible for administering his IV medications 2 times a day at home. So you may have something like that. You'll learn a lot. I had to access his trifusion catheter to give him the medication and then flush it afterwards. So that was pretty scary at first, but we did get through that. And it's important to continue to update your friends and family on your patient's progress and encourage your patient again to write the updates, his or herself. The journey is definitely not over just because the patient's been released from the hospital. There's still so much that goes on, especially in that first 100 days. And make sure your patient wears a mask around at all times and that others wear a mask around your patient as well. So keep clear of crowds. Don't allow any hugs or handshakes. People will be so excited to see your patient when they're out of the hospital, but it's still really important that they're not around a lot of people. Their immune system will be extremely fragile for a while yet. The patient is going to be really fatigued for most of the time, but when they feel up to it, it's really a good idea to get out and about in places where there's not crowds, of course, but it's really important for them to get out and do some things to try to feel like they're getting back to normal life. Go to a weekday movie matinee when there's, generally nobody in the movie theaters. My husband and I would take drives, but you have to make sure you're just not going to be more than 30 minutes from the hospital because emergency situations could still arise. And we were told by our facility, our unit, that we were not allowed to be more than 30 minutes away from the hospital. Just gradually, slowly work your way back to normal everyday life. And remember that the first year post-transplant is critical in the long-term recovery. So be vigilant about following your transplant center's instructions. And, it's a long journey for sure, but eventually you're going to be back to normal life again, and you can both look back and realize how really blessed and miraculous the journey was. So does anybody have any questions?
Thank you. If you'd like to ask a question, please signal by pressing *1 on your telephone keypad. If you're using a speakerphone, please make sure your mute function is turned off to allow your signal to reach our equipment. Again, that is *1 if you would like to ask a question. We'll pause for just a moment to allow everyone the opportunity to signal for questions. Once again, if you would like to ask a question, please press *1 at this time. Ma'am, I'm currently showing no questions in the queue.
Okay. Well, I would just like to thank Sharon so much for being with us today. Excuse me. I know that this was a lot of information to take in, and it is being recorded so that if anybody does want to go back and review that, as well as, again, if you look in your slides that were sent from Peggy, you can certainly go back and look at those. Also, Sharon has said that if anyone has any questions privately for her, you can always reach out to us, and she said that she would be available by email as well.
Ma'am, we did have a couple of questions enter the queue if we have any time.
Oh, absolutely. Let's get to those questions.
Thank you. Our first question.
Hi. I was just wondering, Jennifer, whether you might be able to repeat the phone number and the information regarding the medication assistance line, the one that gives you information about all the different types of medications, the general assistance line.
Oh, absolutely. I gave a website on that slide. It is needymeds.org. It's spelled N-E-E-D like David, Y, and then meds, Mary, EDS.org. And you just punch in the name of the medicine you need help with, and it gives you the criteria and the phone number for the company to contact.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I am showing one further question.
Okay.
Yes. My question is, could you elaborate a little bit on the first 100 days and how important first year, how important that is in the long term?
Yes.
I'll let you know that, Sharon. You're the expert here.
The first 100 days, you most likely will be within 30 minutes of your facility. Have to stay within 30 minutes of your facility. That was our rules, as I would say, from our unit, because your levels are still rising, your counts are still rising, and again, you're a fall risk. So, and that did happen for my husband. You get lightheaded, and so you just really need to be very, very careful in that first 100 days. So that's a mile marker for you once you hit that past that 100 days. And then in the first year, you don't have any immunizations. So you have to really be careful for getting sick. At the end of your first year, you get your baby shots again. My husband received his, everything that you received as a baby gets wiped out when you have your transplant. So at the end of your first year, you get your shots all over again. The whole series starts. So that's why that first year is so critical, that you don't get sick.
Were there any things that you had to really watch out for the first year that you wouldn't even think of having to watch out for besides being maybe in crowded places and, what other restrictions did you have that maybe you wouldn't even think of in that 1 year period?
Well, again, being around anybody that might have a cold, it might not seem like a big deal to them that maybe their child had a runny nose, but it's huge for the patient. So you just want to make sure that you take all of the precautions, and if somebody wants to visit you and their child, has had a runny nose, they say, but I'm fine. I would say err on the side of caution and say, maybe not, or they should at least wear a mask and not be near the patient, not touch the patient.
Did you ever take any trips during that period, like maybe a weekend away or something? Not during the first 100 days. My husband did come home. We were 2.5 hours from the hospital, and he was doing so well by Thanksgiving. His transplant was October 7th, and by Thanksgiving he was doing so well that the doctor let us drive home 2.5 hours from the hospital for the weekend so we could have Thanksgiving at home with our children. But what was scary is my husband did have a fall then. He got lightheaded, and I heard him from the other room fall, and I ran in, and he was on the floor, so that was really scary, really, really, really scary. But he was okay. So, I kind of thought, maybe we shouldn't have come home, but, we were very lucky. So that's why it's so important to stay close to the hospital. And after that 100 days, he probably jumped into work too quickly, and he started traveling 6 months post-transplant, and he did end up getting sick and ended up back in the hospital. So I would say probably 8 to 9 months post-transplant might be safer. Your immunities are built up a little bit better, but, yeah, definitely not 6 months. I would not travel, get on an airplane. Okay, that's great information. Thank you.
Thank you. I am showing another question.
Okay.
Yes, good afternoon. I missed the website on the clinical trials. If you could please repeat it, that would be great. Thank you.
Oh, sure. For that one, actually, my recommendation was Be the Match, and I am just confirming right now. The name of the person is Jason Carter, who runs the program, and their website, I'm pulling it up right now, is bethematch.org, and that'll show you some of the great programs they have as well, and they will connect you with talking to the right people on getting more information about clinical trials. And I'm sorry, it's the Jason Carter program, but Scott Kerwin is the person running it. I apologize.
Scott Kerwin?
Yes, Scott Kerwin. He's also a nurse and extremely knowledgeable.
Okay. Thank you for the information. If I may ask one more question.
Sure.
Thank you. Do you specifically have information about chronic lymphocytic leukemia, especially for patients that are around the 20s? It's usually
for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. For that one, I would recommend the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. They have a ton of great cancer-specific resources, and their information is also in the slides, but I believe it's lls.org, and they also have a phone number on there, too, that they can connect you. They even have nurses on staff and things, too. Their LLS, I have to be honest with you, is one of my favorite organizations other than nbmtLINK right now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we do have that. Thank you so much. I thought maybe you would have something else, but I appreciate it.
Well, that is one, I'll be honest with you. I feel like they've got some really good information.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. I am currently showing no further questions in the queue at this time, ma'am.
Okay. Well, I just want to thank everyone so much for attending this today. And, again, I want to thank Sharon for all of her great tips. And, you know, there's just no one better than someone who's walked through it to educate people on what the day-to-day life is like. And so, Sharon, we appreciate you so much. And if anyone is interested in receiving any more information from us or any of our books about transplant or resources or GVHD, chronic graft versus host disease, you can reach out to us at 1-800-LINK, LINK-BMT. And I want to thank our sponsors, our LINK partners, and I also want to remind you that you will be receiving a survey today. And so if you could take the time to just let us know if there's anything we can do to service you better or programs you'd like to see in the future, we'd really appreciate that. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and have a great day.